Inflation in Canada may be cooling in general, but when it comes to food prices, it is, of course, still uncomfortably high. And for too many Canadians, that means going without. How can we change how we think about food? Anthony Musiwa is Senior Policy Advisor at Community Food Centres Canada. Thanks for being with us, Anthony.
Thank you for having us.
So this notion of food as a basic human right, I think everybody can understand that. Do we need to think about how food fits into our societies and our economy differently to do better around making sure everybody is fed?
Yes, absolutely. I think the way we think about food, we typically think about food as a commodity. But if we begin to think about food as a basic human right, we can begin to think about how we can make that available to everyone. And especially in the Canadian context, when we look at food insecurity, for example, it's really an income problem, not a food problem. So if we think about it in terms of how we measure it for the past 18 years or so, we actually see that people struggle to put food on their table on the basis of limited finances, and not because they have a food availability issue. So if we think about food in terms of a basic human right and not as a commodity, we can actually start beginning to think about the root causes of those insecurities around food and make that available to everyone who needs the support.
I mean, one of the things, of course, we've done with food over the course of the last 100 years is make it a big business. So from the farm to table, every step along the way, we've let the market manage this process. That should, in theory, Anthony, make it more available, produce it in the right quantities, make it cheaper. Is that process, though, letting us down? Do we need to actually stop just letting the market manage this?
I think in a capitalist liberal economic society like Canada, governments have a responsibility to make sure that market forces play out in a way that benefits everyone. Mm-hmm. And if the market forces are not playing out in a way that benefits everyone, the government has a responsibility and an obligation to intervene to protect citizens and residents that fall through the cracks. And we have not been seeing that happening in the Canadian context. If it's happening, it's at least not enough. So in as far as, for example, when you look at the government trying to engage big businesses to control prices, that is not enough. What we need to see is government intervening to protect citizens who cannot thrive in a capitalist market, and those are families that have inadequate income, that they need income supports to make sure they get the basic commodities they need, including food as well.
And well, we've seen record use of food banks, Anthony, in a really kind of terrible way, never seen before in Canada. Does that suggest that this is a problem that's coming to a head?
I think we have seen time and time again. Actually, when we look at when the charitable food sector started in the 80s, it was meant to be a temporary solution. It wasn't meant to be a permanent part of our social safety net infrastructure. And as we continue to see, particularly in the past few years, the charitable food sector is becoming increasingly overwhelmed. And just to give you just an anecdote from our partners, a good example is the Depot Community Food Center in Montreal. Mm-hmm. So this year alone, by the end of the year, they will be on track to distributing more than 20,000 food baskets. And this is double the number of food baskets they distributed last year. So what we are seeing is that the charitable food sector is not in a position to address food insecurity. Food insecurity is not a food problem, it's an income problem. Yep. And local food banks are not going to be able to address it.
Anthony, so good to have you. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Anthony Musiwa is a Senior Policy Advisor at Community Food Centres Canada. Time for the takeaway, and what we don't know could hurt us. The spectacle at OpenAI this week, which saw its founder, Sam Altman, ousted only to be returned to his seat of power within days, was about as dramatic as boardroom battles can get. But for those outside the room, the whole episode raises more questions than answers. And given the importance of the work OpenAI is doing, one that deserves a closer look. OpenAI is the leading body working on generative artificial intelligence. Most of us know it as the company which brought ChatGPT to life. But the highest end of artificial intelligence is far more complex and potentially threatening than anything the public has seen yet. In the past year, dozens of experts in the AI field, including Canadians Geoffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio, who are two of the founders of this technology, have sounded the alarm on the speed at which AI is being developed in an absence of oversight. At its most positive iteration, AI will usher in an era of hyper-efficiency, replacing and bettering humans and existing computer programs with new and advanced systems. But there is a potential for AI to develop in a way that could be more harmful, including using it for manipulation or even criminal practices, and at its most extreme, a concern that AI could harm humans as it outstrips us in intelligence. That may sound like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it is that category that has some of the most knowledgeable scientists worried. We may never know what actually happened to make the board of OpenAI so concerned about Sam Altman, or make it reverse itself. There were suggestions the board was worried about a for-profit approach to AI. OpenAI is half-owned by Microsoft, so profit is certainly part of its agenda. But while we don't know the exact details, we do know that more oversight of how AI is developed is probably required. Getting to more isn't hard, since at the moment there is virtually none. My takeaway? Taking a wait-and-see approach might make sense with other technologies. With artificial intelligence, that will almost certainly mean that if we don't like what we see, it will be too late. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.